Hey guys, tonight we're slinking into the murky alleys of a medieval city under moonlight, your boots soaked and cloak too thin for the chill. You're not a soldier, not a noble, just someone who's decided for reasons unclear, even to you, to become a professional assassin. Your first contract: slip into a well-guarded manor and eliminate a minor noble before dawn. Easy, right? You hug the wall, breathing slow to muffle the sound. The cobblestones beneath you are uneven and damp, slick, with who knows what. The city smells like boiled cabbage and horse sweat, and from the shadows, a rat the size of a cat watches you like it knows you're about to screw this up. This is your glamorous new life. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm always curious who else is up at this hour. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You creep forward. There's no lantern to light your way. Your night vision is your best ally now. Your target is 3 blocks away across the marketplace and past 2 watch patrols. You've memorized their route though. Memorized might be a stretch. You hope it's still the same as it was 2 days ago. Assassination, it turns out, isn't the sleek ballet you imagined. You don't get a secret training facility or a leather notebook of cryptic targets. No, you get a man with a limp in a tavern corner whispering, "He's in the blue house." Midnight. Then he's gone, and you're left wondering what exactly qualifies as blue in a town where everything's brown with soot. Historians still argue whether formal guilds of assassins truly existed, or if most killers for hire were just desperate mercenaries or vigilantes with delusions of grandeur. Some say there were clandestine circles. Others think the so-called guilds were exaggerations penned by fearful nobles. What's certain is that no one gets a tidy welcome letter. You press onward, avoiding the scattered refuse from the day's market, squashed turnips, broken cartwheels, and a lone goose feather that flutters ominously. A drunk stumbles out of a side street, belches in your direction, and returns to his world of mead and regret. You freeze your heart, thudding loud enough to echo. He doesn't see you. You keep moving. The manor comes into view, its timber frame leaning like a tired uncle. A single candle flickers in a high window. You count 3 entrances: front door, 2 obvious, kitchen door might creak, and a loose shutter on the 2nd floor high, risk higher reward. The logical part of you says pick the kitchen. The dramatic part votes shutter. Guess which one wins? You climb a drain pipe, slick with algae and half a century of moss. Your hands slip more than once, and a tile clatters loose, tumbling into the night. You pause, listening for voices, footsteps, anything. Silence. You pull yourself onto the ledge and squeeze through the shutter, landing in a storage room full of dried herbs and dust. Your knees ache. You're not old, just medieval. Inside the manor breathes with the quiet sounds of sleep. A snore here, the groan of settling wood there. You draw your blade, if you can call it that. It's really a sharpened eating knife bent slightly at the hilt. There's no ceremonial dagger or ornate weapon, just this chunk of iron you got from a smith who smelled like onions. Your target sleeps upstairs. You know his name vaguely. Count something. He's not cruel, just politically inconvenient. That's the part you try not to think about. You're doing this for silver, not ideology. You slip up the stairs. They creak like it's their hobby. Every sound feels magnified. At the top, a hallway of doors yawns ahead. You count them. 6. The second on the left you were told. You hope that information is still accurate and not a cruel joke by your informant. You open the door. Inside, a man sleeps on a feather-stuffed mattress, luxurious. A tapestry hangs crooked on the far wall, something with lions. You step forward, blade ready. But then, something odd. There's a child's toy near the bed, a carved wooden knight lying on its side. You hesitate. This isn't the storybook version. There's no dramatic music, no righteous fury. Just a sleepy room and a bat who might wake at any moment. Your hand trembles. This wasn't in the plan. Then a floorboard groans behind you. You spin hard in your throat. You spin on your heel blade, raised only to see a house cat staring up at you, unimpressed. It hisses, tail twitching like you've just interrupted a royal ceremony. You exhale too loudly, and the sleeping man stirs. You drop to the floor, rolling beneath a nearby bench in a motion that feels more theatrical than stealthy. Your elbow lands in a puddle of something sticky. You choose not to identify it. You wait. The man grumbles in his sleep, turns over, and settles again. The cat hops onto the bed like nothing happened. You count to 50 before easing back into the room. Your target's still asleep. You step closer. Heart pounding, so loud it might be audible. You raise your knife and stop again. This time, it's not about a toy or a cat. It's your brain flooding you with questions. What if this is the wrong man? What if he's not your target? What if there's a guest room or a twin brother? Or, this is where proper assassin training would help. Medieval assassins didn't exactly have a boot camp. There were no formal academies, no stylish obstacle courses or instructors yelling motivational phrases. More often, you learned on the job or by watching someone else fail first. Training usually involved a rough apprenticeship under someone marginally better at not dying than you were. And let's be honest, the tools at your disposal aren't helping. You lower your knife to inspect it again. Bent dull. Along one edge, probably more useful as a spoon. Your armor. A threadbare tunic and mismatched leather bracers that squeak when you move. Stealth is a lot harder when your arm sounds like a violin in distress. You consider poison instead. That's what the real professionals used, right? Slip it into a cup of wine, a bowl of stew, and boom, problem solved. Except you don't have any. Why? Because poison is expensive, and the apothecary who sells it won't deal with freelancers. Something about bad for repeat business. Historians still argue whether poison was the true assassin's weapon or more of a literary device. Yes, there are famous examples. Lucrezia Borgia's rumored dinner parties, or the mysterious deaths of a few Byzantine emperors. But in day-to-day work, poison was tricky, too slow, too traceable, too dependent on good timing and cooperative weather. And let's not forget the moral ambiguity. Some contemporaries saw poisoning as dishonorable, less about courage and more about cowardice. Others considered it the height of cunning. It all depended on which side of the goblet you were on. You crouch by the bed, pondering your life choices. Your handler back at the tavern, gave you zero advice beyond don't mess it up. He's the kind of employer who pays half up front and disappears the moment things get complicated. You suspect he doesn't even know the full name of your target, just a vague, he's been a problem. You wonder if this man snores like a problem, because he's doing that now, loudly. The cat stretches yawns and jumps off the bed, brushing past your leg like you're part of the furniture. You exhale again. Okay, focus. This is the job. You've committed. You think of the coin purse waiting back at the tavern, modest, moth-eaten, but yours. You tighten your grip, step forward, and then a bell chimes somewhere in the manor. Not loud, but enough. Maybe a servant stirring, or a ward with insomnia, or a clock mechanism. Doesn't matter. You panic. You turn and slip out of the room. Footsteps, soft, but rushed. Down the stairs, again skipping the creakiest steps with practiced instinct. Through the herb room, out the shutter, and into the night. Your breath clouds in the air as you sprint through the alleyways. No guards, no shouting, no alarm. You got out. Whether the job's done or not, well, that's unclear. But you're alive. That counts. You collapse behind a stack of crates, heart racing. Your hand still grips the knife, the metal warm from your palm. Your knees are muddy. Your pride is bruised. So this is your life now. Training by trial and error. No second chances. No guarantees. Just you, your wits, and the desperate hope that no one saw your face. Tomorrow you'll try again. Or maybe you won't. Depends on whether the handler pays you or disappears into the crowd. But for tonight, you rest. You wake the next morning on a straw mattress in the loft above a stable with hay in your ears and a mouse nibbling your bootlace. Your back aches in 12 places and your neck has seized up like a rusted hinge. You stretch slowly, then reach into your satchel and pull out last night's weapon. It's bent even worse now. Fantastic. This morning's mission: acquiring a new tool. Preferably one that doesn't look like it was stolen from a kitchen. You make your way through the morning market, keeping your hood low. The city's already buzzing traders yelling over each other, children darting between carts, a juggler who's absolutely terrible at his job. You duck into the side streets headed for a known supplier. The blacksmith greets you with a look that says he's been up since dawn and already regrets today. You ask about blades. He points to a barrel of rejects. You sigh and start digging. In the medieval world, assassination tools were improvised, to say the least. Dedicated weapons were rare. Most killers used daggers, short swords, or repurposed tools, sickles, hammers, even heavy needles. Subtlety wasn't always the goal. Speed was. If it got the job done and fit under a cloak, it qualified. You pull out a dagger with a chipped tip and a weirdly greasy handle. It'll do. You hand over 2 coins and a nod. The smith doesn't ask questions. Next stop, poison. Maybe. You slink down an alley behind the butcher's shop and tap 3 times on a moss-covered door. It creaks open to reveal the apothecary's apprentice, a thin boy who looks like he hasn't blinked in a week. He eyes you. Freelance, you nod. He grimaces. Wait here. Minutes pass. You count them. He returns with a vial of thick, green liquid and a shrug. Foxglove and nightshade. Might kill, might paralyze, might do nothing. You stare at the vial. How much? 5. 5. What? Whatever you've got. You give him a coin, a button, and a half loaf of bread. He accepts. Trust is clearly not part of the exchange. Historians still argue whether apothecaries were knowingly complicit in assassination work or just opportunists selling questionable tonics to desperate people. Many worked under a veil of ambiguity, promising effects without specifying purpose. That way, if something tragic happened, well, accidents do occur. You pocket the vial and head out. Now comes the real decision: poison or dagger. Poison is quiet, no blood, no mess, but it requires proximity and timing. Two things you're famously bad at. The dagger, on the other hand, is reliable. You've used it before in tavern brawls, and once on a very aggressive goose. It's not elegant, but you trust it. You weigh the options. As you pass a church bell tower, its toll marking the hour. Noon. You have until sunset to make the next attempt. You settle on both. Tonight you'll sneak into the manor again. This time the kitchen route. You'll poison the wine jug in the dining room and keep the dagger just in case. Belt and suspenders. You spend the afternoon hiding in the rafters of the granary, watching pigeons fight over grain. You eat a heel of bread and stare at the dagger like it owes you money. As dusk falls, you wrap the vial in cloth and tuck it into your cloak. You tighten your boots, secure your belt, and whisper a half-hearted prayer to whichever saint handles extremely niche crimes. You approach the manor under cover of darkness. No clouds tonight, just a bright, accusing moon. The kitchen door is unlocked. You slip inside like a shadow with sore knees. The dining room is empty. The wine jug sits proudly on the table, surrounded by pewter goblets. You unstopper the vial, pour, stir. It smells like regret and overripe berries. You gag quietly. You leave the dagger in your sleeve just in case. Then you retreat into the pantry waiting. Footsteps, voices, laughter. The target enters with two others. A steward pours the wine. Your heart pounds. He drinks. Nothing happens. 5 seconds. 10. 15. He burps, laughs, then stops laughing. He coughs. The steward leans forward. My lord. The man slumps forward face first into a plate of mutton. The steward screams. Chaos erupts. You bolt. Not toward the door, too obvious. You climb, scrambling up a wine rack, pushing through a high window. You land hard in a rose bush, curse loudly, and run like you're being chased by the entire clergy. You don't stop until you're back at the stable's lungs, burning face, bleeding from thorns. You did it, maybe. Assuming he actually died and wasn't just napping very aggressively. Either way, you're not going back to check. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you pace the stable loft like a cat with a guilty conscience. Every creak in the wood makes you flinch. Every hoot of an owl sounds like a crossbow bolt being loaded. Morning comes pale and unwelcome. You decide to check the tavern, the one where your handler said payment would be waiting if the job went well. You're not optimistic. The tavern's name is something forgettable. The Drunken Trowel, maybe. Inside, it smells like sour ale and disappointment. You scan the room. No handler, no coin pouch, no smug nod of approval. But there is a message. Folded parchment on the back table, unmarked. You open it with the caution of a man expecting a scorpion. Inside 3 words: do it again. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you're halfway to madness. Was the man not dead? Did you poison the wrong goblet? Did he survive out of sheer stubbornness? Historians still argue how often assassination attempts failed due to bad intel or faulty methods. Some theorize the success rate was under 50%, which means half of all assassins were just really unlucky criminals with fancy knives. You consider walking away, just vanishing into the countryside, changing your name to Harmless Greg and becoming a cobbler. But then again, pride, and also that handler still owes you silver. So you head back to the manor. This time, you're smarter. You trail the target first, no more guesses. You watch from rooftops, crouched behind chimneys, enduring pigeon droppings and back cramps. You track his movements. Breakfast in the solar, lunch in the garden, dinner in the hall. And after dinner, he retires alone. No guards, just a single servant who lights his way. You spot your opening. That night, you skip the manor entirely. Instead, you wait near the garden gate. The path is dim, the hedges high. Perfect for surprises. You crouch behind a stone bench dagger ready. No poison this time. You've decided that subtlety is overrated. The moon is obscured by clouds. The air smells like wet earth and anxiety. You hear footsteps. Your heart hammers. Then the servant appears, alone. You freeze. Wrong person. You wait. Another set of steps. The target. He walks slowly, humming a tune that suggests either confidence or obliviousness. Maybe both. You rise silent. You step behind him. Close. Closer. Lost something he says without turning. You lunge. He spins. Too fast. Steel flashes. You parry just barely. He's armed. Of course he is. The fight is clumsy. You slash, he blocks. He stabs, you dodge. It's like two blindfolded raccoons swinging spoons. You finally manage a lucky hit blade slicing across his arm. He yells. You run. Because here's the truth. You're not a duelist. You're not even particularly brave. You're just persistent. You duck through the hedges, hop the garden wall, and vanish into the night. Back at the stable, you bind your wounds and sulk. Was that a failure? A partial success? Does making your target bleed count for anything? You write a reply on a scrap of parchment. Not dead. Yet. You leave it at the tavern and vanish again. Over the next week, you try 3 more times. Once with a crossbow, it misfired. Once with a tripwire, he stepped over it. Once with a loaf of very stale bread. Don't ask. Each time you get closer, each time you fail. But each failure teaches you something. About him, about yourself, and about how absurdly hard it is to kill someone in the medieval era without modern conveniences or moral clarity. You start to wonder, is it even worth it? Then one morning, a messenger arrives at the tavern. A sealed letter. Inside a single coin and a note. Contract closed. Cause of death infection. You blink. Turns out that dagger cut you gave him got infected. No doctors, no antibiotics, just rot. It wasn't your plan, but it worked. And just like that, the job is over. You've killed a man, maybe. You'd think killing a noble, even unintentionally, would earn you a reputation. Maybe a carved ring or a dramatic new nickname like the Whispering Blade. Instead, all you get is a flea bite and a bill for your last drink. The city doesn't change. The market's still noisy. The sky still smells of chimney smoke and yesterday's stew. But you walk differently now, slightly more confident, slightly more paranoid. You've earned your stripes, sorta. Except now, everyone seems to be looking at you. You catch a guard, squinting your way near the blacksmith's. A merchant frowns when you pass. Even the apothecary's apprentice won't meet your eye. You didn't exactly leave a clean trail. Someone's probably pieced things together, which means it's disguise time. You raid the back of a weaver's stall for scraps, linen, burlap, whatever you can steal or trade. You end up with something vaguely resembling a monk's robe. It itches in places you didn't know could itch, and the hood is too big, but it'll do. You shave your patchy beard, smear ash on your cheeks for a faux pilgrimage look, and rehearse your new accent, vaguely southern, vaguely educated, mostly confusing. You stroll through town like a man with holy errands, clutching a satchel full of nothing and muttering prayers to saints you invent on the spot. Saint Cranach of the left hand, Saint Beeswick of urgent forgiveness. Disguises in medieval times were rarely elaborate. Most assassins changed clothes posture and locale rather than creating full alter egos. The average town guard couldn't read, couldn't spot a forged seal, and didn't ask questions unless paid to. Still, your disguise works for a day. Then the gate guard at the north wall stops you. Didn't you just come through here last week? You smile weakly. Pilgrimage. Looped back. He narrows his eyes. That a monk's robe? You nod. Looks like a potato sack. You nod again. Frugality is holy. He laughs. A dry, skeptical noise, then waves you through. You don't breathe until you're a mile past the gate. You sleep in a ruined granary that night, rats nibbling your leftover bread, and moonlight spilling through the collapsed roof. You dream of being chased by a goose wearing a crown. The next morning, you head for a nearby village, hoping to vanish into anonymity. But then you hear it. Monk, someone calls. You freeze. Turn slowly. It's a child, dirty, wide-eyed. You know Saint Cranach, you blink, of the left hand. He nods furiously. Pa says he protects crooked harvests. Can you bless our turnips? You nod solemnly. I charge 2 turnips and a boiled egg. You bless the field by waving your dagger discreetly under your robe. News spreads. Within hours, you're blessing goats, scaring off weevils, and officiating a wedding. It's the most successful day of your career. Historians still argue whether false monks were common or just a narrative tool for discrediting dissenters. Some records suggest an entire underground network of fake clergy offering fake absolution for real crimes. You're not part of any network, but you're faking things just fine. That night, the village offers you stew and a place in the barn. You lie on the hay, staring at the rafters. You were supposed to be an assassin. Now, you're a turnip priest. Life's weird, but you're alive. Morning sunlight slants through the barn's wooden slats, waking you with a sneeze and a backache. You roll over, dislodging a particularly bold chicken from your chest. The stew from last night churns uneasily in your belly. It might have been goat or weasel, hard to say. You sit up and remember you're still a fake monk. Still on the run. Still technically a murderer. You sigh. Today's plan, keep moving. You thank the villagers with exaggerated humility, bless 3 more goats, and head toward the nearest trade road. Your destination is a town you've only heard whispered about Flanders. Or maybe it's just the name of the worst inn there. Half a day's walk brings you to it. The sign hangs crookedly, the snoring night. Inside it smells of beer, damp wool, and long-forgotten arguments. The innkeeper greets you with a grunt and shows you to your room, an attic crawl space barely big enough to sit in. You lie down and are immediately scratched by straw that feels more twig than bedding. You pay with a boiled egg and a borrowed blessing. Welcome to the glamorous world of the medieval assassin. Traveling in disguise, you learn quickly, has perks and perils. People don't ask many questions of holy men, but they do ask for favors. Prayers, charms, livestock, blessings, advice on marital troubles. You become a traveling confessor for sins both minor and eyebrow-raising. But your biggest challenge isn't the people. It's the fleas. Your inn mattress is a living ecosystem, and you are its newest resident. By nightfall, you've scratched yourself raw. You wrap a scarf around your ankles, a trick a tanner once mentioned, but it doesn't help. You try to sleep. You really try. But every creak of the floorboards, every drunken shout from downstairs, makes your muscles tense. This place is supposed to be neutral ground, but neutral in medieval terms often means don't ask, don't bleed. Historians still argue whether inns functioned as informal safe zones for travelers with shady reputations. There are chronicles describing murderers and mercenaries sharing tables, never asking each other's names. Some even claim certain inns had code words for ensuring anonymity, though evidence is shaky. Your code word tonight, I'll take the small ale, no questions. You sit in the corner of the tap room, hood-up eyes scanning the room. A bard sings badly about a love triangle involving a goose. 3 farmers argue about cheese taxes. A hooded man, 2 tables over, drinks something that smells flammable. And then you see him, your handler. He's older than you, remembered, hair grayer clothes less noble than suggested. He sips his drink and eyes you like a butcher eyeing a twitchy pig. You sit beside him slowly. I heard he died, you say. He did, the handler replies. You didn't pay me, I did, indirectly. You blink, the coin and note. He nods. You earned more than coin. You earned trust. You're not sure if that's supposed to be comforting. He slides over a folded scrap of parchment. Another name, another town. You don't take it. What's the real pay? This time you ask. Bored at another inn, he says with a smirk. No fleas, probably. You stare at the parchment. Then at your hands, scratched, bruised, calloused. This wasn't the life you dreamed of. Then again, what was? You take the parchment, not because you want to, because this world offers 2 choices. Be the blade or fall on it. You order another ale. It tastes like feet. You leave before dawn, a crust of bread in your pocket and a small knife in your boot. The road ahead is long, muddy, and lined with ditches filled with yesterday's rain. You're heading to a border town with a name you can't pronounce and a lord you've never heard of. Your handler's note says only sewer access under west wall, which is how 3 nights later you find yourself ankle deep in something you refuse to identify crawling through a stone tunnel barely wider than your shoulders. Your torch sputters in the damp air, throwing long shadows across the slime-slick walls. This is what medieval infiltration really looks like. You imagined rooftops and rope swings. Instead, you're dragging yourself past a drowned rat and a broken bucket, trying not to retch. Every time you shift your weight, the muck squelches around your boots like it's judging you. There's no map, just a whispered rumor and your own questionable instincts. Historians still argue how often sewers were genuinely used by assassins or spies. Some evidence suggests yes tunnels beneath castles and cities offered access for the brave and the foolish. But more often, they were blocked, guarded, or simply too disgusting to risk. You're starting to understand why. You reach a rusted grate and peer through. Light, faint, flickering, a storeroom. A cellar. You give the grate a shove. It groans, but holds. You pull your knife, wedge it beneath the rim, and pry. The metal snaps free with a shriek, and you freeze, heart hammering. No footsteps. No shouting. Just the soft drip of sewer sludge. You climb into the room. An old wine cellar by the smell. Barrels line the walls. Dust covers everything. You wipe your hands on your robe, which at this point is more filth than fabric. You pause. Breathe. Above you, somewhere in the manor, your target dines. You know the pattern: feast, wine, music, sleep. The job is simple. Get to the sleeping part. You move quietly, hugging walls, avoiding floorboards that look like they'd squeal. You ascend a narrow stairwell and emerge behind a tapestry, just like in the stories. Except this tapestry smells like mildew and disappointment. You peek through a tier. 2 guards. Not many, but more than none. You retreat thinking. There's a servant's route somewhere, there always is. You find it behind the kitchen, a cramped hall with low ceilings and stairs built for people half your height. You duck and press on. The target's room is at the top. You know this from eavesdropping all day while pretending to be a wandering vinegar seller. You're not proud. You reach the door. No lock, just a latch. You push it open. The room is dark still. A fire burns low. The noble snores in a canopy bed. A goblet lies on the floor spilled. You cross the floor, silently, blade drawn. You're calmer this time, focused, ready, until you step on a cat. It yowls, loudly. The noble stirs. You react, instinct, panic, dart forward, and press the blade. But the cat claws your leg like it's personal. The noble sits up, eyes wide. You bolt, through the door, down the stairs, past 2 shocked guards who shout and give chase. You race back through the kitchen, knock over a soup pot, and duck into the wine cellar. You fumble for the sewer grate. It's jammed. Of course it is. You shoulder the barrels aside, find a rear trap door, and dive into a pile of onions. You don't stop running until you're half a mile into the woods, gasping, bleeding, and smelling like medieval salad. Another failure. Maybe. But you're alive. And that's starting to feel like its own kind of success. You lie in the underbrush, listening to the distant alarm bells, and whisper to the stars. This job sucks. The stars don't argue. By morning, you're covered in mud bruises and an increasingly philosophical resentment toward castles. They weren't designed to be infiltrated. They were designed to make people like you miserable. You limp along a deer trail, your legs scratched from the cat your pride mangled beyond recognition. In the distance, the castle looms tall, smug, and utterly unmurderable. You plop down on a mossy log groaning. You need a new plan. Because here's the dirty secret of medieval assassination: killing someone inside a castle is nearly impossible. Not just because of the guards, or the thick stone walls, or the moat full of who knows what. No, it's the logistics. Castles were designed for defense, and they did their job spectacularly. High walls, limited entry points, internal courtyards with clear sight lines for archers. Getting in unnoticed is hard. Getting out alive, laughable. Historians still argue whether successful castle assassinations were due to inside help or sheer dumb luck. Chronicles from the 13th and 14th centuries mention a few such attempts, often involving disguised servants, bribes, or secret tunnels, most of which turned out to be exaggerated or entirely fabricated. You've tried the sewer. You've tried disguise. You even tried a ladder once, which resulted in a broken ankle and a very angry goat. So, this time, you go for the only logical approach: patience. You take up residence in a half-collapsed barn overlooking the rear castle wall. From there, you watch. For days. You count guards, watch patrol patterns, note meal deliveries. You observe the nobles' habits: morning prayers, afternoon, hawking evening card games. And you wait for a mistake. On the fourth day it happens. A wagon delivering firewood is waved through without inspection. The driver is local, trusted, invisible. You follow him on his next trip, slipping into the back of the cart and burying yourself in splintery logs. You enter the castle unnoticed. The cart stops in the wood yard. You wait until no one's looking, then hop out and dart into the shadows. You make your way through the lower corridors, disguised as a scullion with a firewood bundle. You reach the hallway outside the noble's chamber. Your timing is perfect. He's inside, alone. You hear humming. You knock once softly. He opens the door expecting a servant. You stab. It's fast, clumsy, not elegant. He gasps, stumbles back, and falls. You don't wait to admire your work. You run. Back through the corridors, through the kitchens, into the courtyard. A guard yells. You're spotted. You sprint, not toward the gate, too many eyes. You aim for the stables. You steal a horse. You've never ridden one. It doesn't go well. The horse panics. You panic. Together, you crash through the outer gate, past a stunned guard who drops his pike in shock. You gallop down the road, clinging to the saddle like it's the last loaf of bread on earth. Only once you've put 2 miles behind you do you slow down, heart thundering. You did it, probably, unless he survived. Again. You limp into the next town, 2 days later, saddle sore and smelling like terror. You hear whispers, a noble dead or dying. No one knows. Your handler's not there. But a coin purse is, heavy. You sit in the corner of the inn with a drink and stare at it. You could walk away now. You really could. But something in you, the same thing that crawled through a sewer and fought a cat, says otherwise. There's always another castle, another target, another stupid, impossible job. You drink. It tastes slightly less like feet. You're halfway through your beer, finally considering a bath, when a merchant crashes into the tavern yelling, "The Duke's dead." Wrong one, though. Your heart skips. You lower your mug. Wrong one. You strain to hear the details as the crowd buzzes. Seems the noble you took out wasn't your intended target. He had a cousin, nearly identical in face and fashion sense, who happened to be house-sitting the night you made your move. You stabbed the stand-in. The actual Duke, he was off hawking pheasants and playing dice in a nearby abbey. You sit back stunned. You killed the wrong man. In medieval politics, that's not just a mistake. It's a diplomatic disaster. Historians still argue how often mistaken identity altered political landscapes. There are cases where assassinations set off wars because the victim wasn't who the killer thought. One such incident led to an entire monastery being burned down in retaliation. Oops, now you've got two problems. One very angry duke with fresh motivation to find you, and the fact that you're the guy who assassinated his cousin. Your handler, of course, is gone. No note this time, no coin. Just an innkeeper's shrug and the bill for your room. You pay with the last of your silver and hit the road before someone recognizes you. You shave your head. Change your name again. Try something obscure this time. Tobias the Quiet. You become a traveling weaver, which is ironic considering your skill with cloth is abysmal. Your disguise. Threadbare robes a loom you've never used, and a constant expression of mild confusion. You lie low in a fishing village for a while, mending nets badly, and offering prayers for boat safety. The locals are kind suspicious, and slightly afraid of you, which suits you fine. Then one afternoon, you see him. The Duke. Not in person, thank heavens, but his likeness. A woodcut posted outside the tavern. Reward offered. Picture crude, but unmistakably you, or at least what you looked like before the fleas and the haircut. You pull your hood tight and slink away again. Being an assassin wasn't supposed to be this complicated. You were promised coin shadows and dramatic exits. Instead, you get mistaken identities and a constant case of imposter syndrome. You retreat to the woods, camping under the stars, dodging patrols. Your meals are whatever you can catch or trade for. Mostly berries and regrettable mushrooms. One night, you eat something that makes you see colors that don't exist. You swear a squirrel offers you a job. That's when it hits you. You've made this life up as you went. Every disguise, every plan, every kill you stumbled through, them half lucky and half desperate. And still, somehow you've become a ghost story. They're talking about you now in town square. Whispered warnings, the monk blade, the vinegar killer, that guy with the cat scratch. You chuckle despite yourself, because now the real Duke wants you, not because of who you are, but because of who he thinks you are, which is frankly more terrifying. You pack up your camp, adjust your ridiculous disguise, and head south, away from the posters, toward your next mistake. Your next mistake begins with a boot. Just one. You lose it in a river crossing gone wrong fast. Current mossy stones, a misplaced step, and suddenly you're knee-deep in freezing water, watching your left boot float downstream like it's on a grand adventure. You scramble out, soaked and shivering, and squelch barefoot into the nearest woods. Congratulations. You're now a fugitive with a very damp sock and a serious case of regret. The forest offers no shelter, just damp leaves, echoing crows, and the distinct feeling that you're being watched because of course you are. Someone is always watching now. You press on, limping every stick underfoot, a minor betrayal. Your satchel holds 3 coins, a crust of bread, and a knife duller than your wit on a bad day. You pass travelers and merchants on the road, eyes down, voice hoarse from disuse. Pilgrim, you say, when questioned, pointing vaguely toward the mountains. Seeking absolution. It's worked before. But the wanted posters are working harder. They're everywhere now. Nailed to trees, tacked inside taverns, held by guards on horseback. The sketch has improved. Now, it shows your crooked nose and one slightly too large ear. Someone's getting good at woodcut likenesses, and you hate them for it. Historians still argue whether medieval fugitives stood any real chance of escaping pursuit. With no national ID, no photographs, and only word of mouth to go on, it might seem easy. But for high-profile targets, local informants, bribes, and sheer dumb luck often closed the gap. And you're very high profile now. The Duke has put a price on your head, enough coin to tempt the desperate and the bored alike. Innkeepers eye you too long. Stable boys whisper. A man in a wide-brimmed hat follows you for a mile before vanishing into a hedge. So you run. At first, it's strategic switching roads, doubling back, hiding your trail. Then it becomes habit. Then panic. You forget where you're going. You only know what you're leaving. Your other boot gives up in a bog. You discard it and wrap your feet in rags. You start to resemble a scarecrow that's seen things. Eventually, you find an old hunting lodge, abandoned, half collapsed, but dry. You stay there a week, boiling roots, whispering to the fire, and sketching escape plans in the dirt with a stick. They all end with, "Don't die." You nearly do. A patrol comes. One night, torches flickering through the trees. You hear Boots' dog's voices. You flatten behind the lodge wall, barely breathing, blade clenched in hand. The dogs pause at the door, sniff, growl, but the men move on. By dawn, you're gone again. And the road doesn't get easier. Your feet bleed, your ribs show. Your voice grows quiet even in your own head. You speak to no one. You sleep in fits with one eye open and a hand on your knife. One day, you pass a child holding a wooden toy. A knight with a painted red cross. He stares at you. You nod. "Are you the killer?" he asks in the way children do, blunt and curious. You say nothing. He offers you the toy. You take it. No one's ever given you anything without wanting something in return. You walk away holding it like a relic. The road bends south, toward hills, toward somewhere nameless. You no longer care where you end up, only that you keep going. You reach the edge of a crooked town just as your hunger makes the trees look delicious. You're gaunt now, skin pulled tight, eyes sunken, beard feral. You look less like a monk and more like a prophecy of doom. The sign above the apothecary sways in the wind, a painted mortar and pestle faded with time. You hesitate, then step inside. It smells like crushed herbs, vinegar, and secrets. The shelves are crowded with bottles, some clear, some dark, some with labels that look like ancient curses. Behind the counter is a woman with hair like rusted copper and the kind of expression that says she knows exactly how you'll die and when. You approach slowly, holding out your last coin. "I need something," you rasp. She raises an eyebrow. "Something to kill, or something to forget?" You blink, then whisper, "Both." She smiles like a cat that's seen too many mice. The deal is quick. You get a vial of liquid that glows faintly green. She gets your coin, a chunk of your pride, and the name of the Duke you're running from. "Be careful," she says. "He has friends." You pocket the vile stomach churning. 3 hours later, you're in a barn loft again, staring at the cork. You don't drink it yet, because part of you still hopes there's a third option: survival. Later that night, the barn door creaks. You sit up, blade ready. It's her, the apothecary. "How did you—" She holds up a satchel. "You left this. Inside a second vial, this one clear. No label. Just a folded note. Just in case he finds you first." You stare at it. 2 vials. 2 endings. She leaves without another word. Historians still argue the role apothecaries played in these murky dramas. Some were healers, others informants. A few quiet executioners, in their own right, using tinctures no one could trace. Medieval justice, outsourced to subtle hands. You don't sleep. You spend the night watching the rafters sway, weighing options. If you poison the Duke, he dies, and you run again. If you drink the other vial, maybe you vanish before they catch you. But what if there's a third option? The next day, you visit the market square. You hear whispers. The Duke's men are coming. The apothecary is gone. You leave both vials in the hands of a wandering tinker. "Sell them," you say, "or don't." He nods like it makes sense. You walk away. You still don't know what you're doing, but for the first time, it feels like your choice. It doesn't take long for the knights to find you. You're on a wooded trail, trying to barter a rabbit pelt for bread, when the thudding of hooves shatters the silence. 3 riders appear over the ridge, chainmail gleaming like menace in daylight. The lead knight wears a crimson surcoat and the face of someone born into violence. His helm is shaped like a snarling beast. His voice, pure gravel. "You there. Stay." You don't. You run. It's not a strategic decision. Your feet move before your brain catches up. You dart into the trees, heart-thundering cloak flapping like a flag of desperation. Behind you, shouting. The heavy clatter of armor, a whistle, then the barking of hounds. You vault a log, trip, roll, scramble to your feet, covered in leaves and bad decisions. The forest closes in branches, clawing at your face. You dash down a ravine slide in the mud and crash into a stream. You wade, then swim, then just flail. Anything to stay ahead. Eventually, breath-ragged legs leaden, you find a hollow tree and crawl inside. Silence follows. Then the slow, deliberate clop of hooves nearby. You hold your breath. Historians still debate how effective knights were at tracking fugitives through forests. Some say their armor made them clumsy hunters. Others argue their sheer persistence and the use of local trackers made them terrifyingly efficient. You're hoping for the former. The hoofbeats fade. You stay hidden until dusk. When you emerge, the world feels sharper, colder. You've crossed some threshold, not just physical, but mental. You're not just running anymore, you're surviving. You find shelter in a hunter's cabin. Empty, dusty. Half a wheel of cheese sits forgotten on a shelf. You eat it like royalty. The next day, you hear rumors in a nearby hamlet. A manhunt. The Duke's personal knights. Something about a reward doubled. You don't stay long. You move only at night now, sleeping beneath brambles, drinking from streams, eating whatever doesn't try to bite you first. The world narrows to footfalls and instinct. Then one foggy morning, you come upon a chapel ruin. It's silent, ivy-covered, forgotten. You enter cautiously. The altar is crumbling. The pews are nests. But in the corner, a faded tapestry. It shows a knight bowing before a monk. You stare at it a long time, because despite everything, part of you still remembers the disguise. You take shelter there for days. Fix a broken bench. Patch your cloak. Carve a new walking stick. The knights don't find you, not yet, but you know they're coming. So when you leave, it's not in fear, it's in readiness. You head for the hills, toward colder nights, fewer trails, and quieter ghosts. You're no longer just hunted. You're becoming legend. You cross into the low hills of the southern marches with only a sliver of moon to guide you. The land flattens, then climbs, patches of fog clinging to the ground like lazy ghosts. Every step forward is both a retreat and a gamble. Your goal now is Venice. Why Venice? Because someone once told you, if you can reach Venice, no one can touch you. Whether that was myth rumor or just ale-soaked optimism, you're clinging to it like a prayer. It's hundreds of miles away. You have no map, no boots, no plan. Just calloused feet, stubborn lungs, and an increasingly vivid hatred of everything north of the Alps. You move from village to village, sticking to back roads, avoiding bridges where toll keepers might recognize your face. You learn to travel like smoke drifting, curling, never lingering. The Alps rise in the distance like jagged warnings. Snow still caps the peaks. You sigh. Your knees already hate you. Along the way, you take odd jobs, sweeping churchyards, chopping wood, even once posing as a mute relic seller in a roadside fair. You sell a fake saint's toenail to a merchant from Verona. He pays with salted fish. You eat it carefully, eyes darting. But the road is long, and the past keeps catching up. At a tavern in a valley town, you hear your name well, a version of it spoken by a traveler beside the hearth. Killed a duke's cousin, then vanished. Wears monk robes. Carries a crooked blade. The others laugh. One mutters, sounds like a folk tale. You slip out before they finish their drinks. Historians still argue how long fugitives could realistically remain at large in medieval Europe. Borders were fluid. Names changed easily. But with the right bounty, even remote mountain villages might host a keen-eyed tracker. You climb into the highlands, breath growing, short nights growing colder. One evening, while foraging, you find an old hermit's shelter, little more than stones, stacked into a windbreak. But it has a roof and a carved bench. You light a small fire and wrap yourself in rags, watching sparks drift into the stars. You're not religious, not really. But you talk to the sky anyway. Just let me reach Venice. It doesn't answer. The next morning, snow dusts the ground. Your toes are purple. You wrap them in moss. At the summit of a narrow pass, you look down and see the plains of northern Italy stretched out like a map. Distant towers, rivers, roads like thin threads. You've made it this far. You can make it farther. You descend step by frozen step into the warmth of a land that might forget your name. Venice is nothing like you imagined. It rises out of the water like a half-drowned cathedral. All narrow bridges and echoing bells masks on faces and secrets in alleyways. You arrive on foot, barefoot, still your robe clinging with road dust and your beard now a full-fledged ecosystem. At the city gates, you give a false name, one you've used before, one no one's looked twice at Brother Anselmo. The guard shrugs. Pilgrim. You nod. He waves you through. You're in. The city's scent hits first salt brine fish perfume, and something unnameable, probably ambition. You melt into the crowds. Here anonymity is currency, and yours is freshly minted. For weeks, you live in shadows. You sleep in warehouses, chapels, abandoned gondolas. You eat stale biscotti and barter holy blessings for scraps. You speak little, listen much. Venice hums with opportunity and danger. The assassins here are different. Polished, professional. They wear velvet gloves and speak 5 languages. Some call themselves couriers, others merchants. But you see the signs-coded gestures, tilted hats, rings on wrong fingers. One day, you follow one of them. A man in crimson, always eating figs. You trail him to a quiet piazza where he passes a scroll to a masked woman with a falcon embroidered on her sleeve. No words exchanged. You've stumbled into a different league. Here contracts are whispered in palazzos, and deaths occur during masquerades. Your methods, Mudcat's accidental poison, would draw laughs. But even among this elite, you find kindred spirits. One evening, you're cornered in a wine cellar by a man with knives up his sleeves and eyes like frozen honey. Brother Anselmo, he says. You tense. He grins. Relax. I've heard your legend. He offers you a job, something simple. A banker, 2 floors up, light sleeper. You hesitate, then decline. Not out of fear, out of exhaustion. Because now you see the end of the road, and it's not gilded, it's just quiet. Historians still argue whether Venice truly housed underground guilds of killers, or whether its shadowy reputation was inflated by visitors and spies. What's clear is this, in a city of masks, the blade is never far behind. You choose not to wear one. You take up work in a print shop. Ink-stained fingers, quiet mornings. The owner doesn't ask questions. You sleep above the presses, lulled by the scent of paper and oil. Occasionally, someone knocks late at night, leaves a coin on your windowsill, a silent plea. You always leave it there untouched, because you're done. Maybe. You're not sure yet. But for now, the water laps gently outside, and no one's chasing you. You made it. The days in Venice become a rhythm of quiet labor. You rise with the bells, eat bread too hard for teeth, and clean the presses with rags that stain your hands black. No one here knows who you are. More importantly, no one asks. At night, you walk the canals. Not far, just enough to breathe. You watch the gondoliers steer their crafts through moonlit arches, Hear laughter from masked revelers drifting across the water. You are a ghost among them. You keep your cloak, though you've patched it a dozen times. Your blade, still that crooked, rusting stub of iron, rests beside your bed, untouched. Occasionally, news reaches you. Murmurs of a new duke in the north. Rumors that the old one died of a wound that never healed. You don't flinch when you hear it. Not anymore. What lingers isn't guilt or pride, but fatigue. One night, as you pack books for shipment to Padua, the printmaster hands you a small parchment. No name, just a symbol, a crooked dagger crossed over a chalice. You recognize it. A calling card. Your past delivered in ink. You stare at it long enough for the candles to gutter. Then you toss it into the press fire and watch it curl into ash. You're done. Truly, this time. Historians still argue whether those who walked away from the blade ever found peace. Some vanished into monasteries, others into marriage or madness. The rarest became storytellers, whispering legends by firelight, their eyes flickering with ghosts. You don't speak of it. You just keep living. A few weeks later, you help repair a broken press wheel. Your hands, once skilled at murder, now coax metal and wood into balance. You find comfort in small things. The smell of fresh ink, the creak of boards at dusk, the rare smile from the apprentice who's taken to calling you nonno. You like that. And so the days drift quiet and steady, like the tide that cradles the city. You think often of that first night, crouched in an alley dagger, drawn heart-pounding with inexperience. And you smile gently. You survived. That in itself is the rarest art of all. So now, as the Venetian mist settles low over the water, and the bells hush for the night, you return to your bed above the press. You ease down onto the worn mattress bones, creaking joints, sighing. The air smells faintly of paper pulp and cooled oil, strangely comforting, like an old cloak you no longer need to wear. Outside, footsteps fade along the stone pathways. Gondolas knock gently against their moorings, rocking like cradles. Somewhere a cat mews once and disappears into the dark. You listen to the quiet, not the silence of fear or hiding, but the deep, restful kind. The kind earned not by blood, but by time. You made mistakes. You saw too much. You survived more than you should have. But now, you rest. Let the night wash over you. Let your breath slow. Let the sounds of the world blur and soften like candlelight behind a curtain. You're safe. No one's chasing you now. No one's looking for you. You are exactly where you chose to be. And as your eyes grow heavy and your limbs go slack, the last thing you feel is peace. Simple, undeserved, unasked for peace. The kind that even ghosts envy. You walk barefoot across the frost-hardened ground. No name, no coin, no plan. Just a threadbare cloak and 100 mistakes stitched into your memory. You tell yourself you're done. No more shadows. No more blades. But fate, as always, has its own embroidery to finish. That night, you sleep beneath a ruined fig tree and dream of silk. Threads winding through cities you've never seen. Codes hidden in hems. Messages that whisper through fabric like wind through leaves. When you wake, It's not to birdsong or bells, but to the scent of mulberry and ink. You're somewhere else now, someone else. You don't know how you got here, just that you woke up with silk pressed to your skin, a half-remembered name on your tongue, and the sense that this isn't your first life in the shadows. Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through the cobbled back streets of Constantinople, just as the torches are doused and the city exhales. You keep to the shadows, ducking beneath faded linen awnings that sway like whispers. Every step echoes on ancient stone. Behind shuttered windows, oil lamps flicker out one by one. The city is going to bed, but you're just getting started. Somewhere ahead, between a fishmonger's stall and a dye-splattered textile stand, someone is watching you. Not openly, of course. That wouldn't be very Byzantine of them. No, you feel it the way you feel humidity in silk cloying, invisible, inevitable. You're following the scent of heated mulberry and damp parchment. This part of the capital is technically closed after dark, but nobody tells the spies that. The silk quarter is never truly silent. There's always someone sewing in a back room, muttering encoded rhymes, or fiddling with fabric that somehow rustles a little too much for silk alone. A bolt of fabric flutters in the breeze, though there is no breeze. You step aside just as a tabby cat launches from a windowsill, a fat rat dangling from its mouth like an imperial standard. A splash of blood stains the flagstones. Welcome to the quieter side of empire. Constantinople was many things. A beacon of learning, a nexus of trade, a lighthouse of the Orthodox faith. But tonight, it is simply a sponge for secrets. And you're about to soak a few up. You round the corner and catch sight of your contact, a man in his 40s, if you trust the lines on his face, wearing a tunic far too fine for someone loitering in an alley. He's leaning against a wall covered in faded frescoes of winged saints. His sandals are dusty, but his hands clean. Too clean. No calluses, no scars. Definitely not a dock worker. He's holding a bolt of silk, dyed a shade of plum so deep it could pass for bruised twilight. He nods once and vanishes inside a narrow doorway. No words, no smile. You wait 5 heartbeats, then follow. The room is dark. Its only light filtered through stained glass slivers in the upper wall. Silhouetted against them, a loom stands like an altar. Threads of gold, teal, and rust stretch taut across its frame. You're offered a seat on a low cushion beside it. The bolt is unrolled, not with haste, but with reverence. Inside, between 2 layers of sheer gauze, lies a strip of silk, narrower than your forearm, and stitched with a pattern that shifts in the light. It looks decorative at first, just another bit of Byzantine overkill. But as the candlelight flickers, you start to notice anomalies. Letters, forming only when viewed from a precise angle. The work of a master embroiderer, or a state-trained one. The man finally speaks, voice dry as woven flax. Tell the monks of Petra that the river has changed course. You nod, unsure whether that's code for a troop movement, a trade route alteration, or just poetic nonsense. It doesn't matter. Your job is to carry it, not to understand it. Understanding gets you executed. Historians still argue whether silk scrolls were ever truly used for full-length political dispatches or simply as carriers for brief ciphered messages. But what is certain is that silk was favored not only for its elegance, but its silence. Unlike crinkling parchment, silk whispered, when folded, if it made any sound at all. Back on the street, you pass a washerwoman humming to herself. She's dabbing at a tunic, with a sponge muttering what sounds like a prayer. Only you notice the cloth she's pressing is lined with ink-resistant silk, a sign that perhaps it's meant to repel more than just wine stains. This is your first delivery tonight. There will be others, some stitched into belts, others tucked inside sandals, one rumored to be etched invisibly into the grain of a carved ivory comb, but that's later. For now, you disappear into the sleep breath of the city, where secrets drift like incense and the walls are always listening. You wake with the sun warming your ankles. The floor beneath you is cold tile, and a peacock shrieks from some rooftop aviary, far too close for comfort. You're in a safe house. Probably. The silken strip now lies beneath your sleeping mat, stitched into the seam by careful hands sometime before dawn. The Byzantines were master bureaucrats, yes, but also master improvisers. And when it came to espionage, silk wasn't just luxury. It was camouflage. Light breathable, easy to hide in clothing, and crucially capable of being written on. This morning, your contact is not a man, but a child. Maybe 10, maybe 12. Impossible to tell under the soot and sootier attitude. She's waiting outside with a basket of pomegranates, one of which she hurls at your feet. Inside, a tiny scrap of raw silk wrapped around the fruit stem like a decorative flourish. But the twist of it, the precise number of loops, carries a message. Something only a trained eye would catch. She squints up at you. You're bleeding. You look down. The peacock from earlier has apparently taken a swipe at your calf. You wave her off, but she's already disappeared into the alley, trailing citrus peel and attitude. Back inside, you carefully unroll the silken scrap. It's not inked too risky. Instead, a pattern of knots mimics a merchant's shorthand. Each bump, each gap, corresponds to a phrase. This message warns of a possible sweep by palace guards tonight. You won't be delivering anything today, but you will be learning. Silk scrolls weren't always scrolls in the parchment sense. Sometimes they were ribbons, scarves even braided into hairpieces. The versatility of silk made it ideal for a society obsessed with visual code. Byzantines had whole languages of embroidery. A color might signal allegiance. A hemline shape might spell dissent. And a single mismatched thread that could start a war. In one recorded instance, though, some scholars doubt its authenticity. A priest in Cappadocia reportedly discovered a scroll made entirely of twisted silk fibers. It contained no ink. Only the way the fibers overlapped, bent, and coiled held the meaning. The priest had it burned, of course. Heresy, probably. But some think he didn't burn it at all. Some think he read it and vanished soon after. You spend the rest of the morning watching dyers work. They dip long skeins into steaming vats, the colors swirling like dreams gone sour. Indigo, saffron, madder red. You try not to flinch when one man plucks a thread from behind his ear and mutters something to a colleague. Just gossip, maybe. Or maybe code. Historians still argue whether these silk messages were ever mass-produced in workshops or made strictly by hand one-on-one. The evidence is elusive. Silk degrades fast, and the Byzantines weren't known for leaving behind the juicy stuff in their official records. But oral histories persist, like the one about a widow who smuggled battle plans inside her child's blanket, woven with a weft known only to the emperor's court weaver. You leave the dyers behind and head uphill into a quieter part of the city where the wind smells less of fish and more of pine sap. A vendor tries to sell you a bolt of silk embroidered with dolphins, claiming it's from Antioch. It isn't. But you nod anyway. You're not here to buy. You're here to pass unnoticed. The city buzzes around you, but certain faces catch your eye. A boy polishing sandals whose fingers are too calloused for his age. A nun kneeling in prayer whose habit conceals a glimpse of saffron-threaded silk. A butcher who slices just a little too evenly, like someone used to copying manuscripts, not carving meat. They're all part of it. Maybe. That's the thing about Byzantine spying. You never really know who's in on it until it's far too late. As night draws near again, you check your sash one last time. The stitched band inside carries only 6 words. To the untrained eye, just decorative loops. But to the right monk in the right monastery, it reads like a war drum. You smile, just barely. Because tonight, the silk speaks again. You slip through the city's pulse as twilight drips like melted resin between the rooftops. The silk quarter is stirring again, like an ant nest poked too softly. This time, you're tracing a route far more winding than you remember. Left at the bread ovens, right past the mosaic of St. Marina, 2 steps back when you smell cloves. Then duck into a corridor lined not with walls, but curtains, velvet brocade, and of course silk, each embroidered with symbols no tourist guide could decipher. You've entered the labyrinth, not a mythical one, though you wouldn't put it past the Byzantines to build one of those too, but a neighborhood within Constantinople, known for its tangled alleys, hidden archways, and rooftop bridges. It's here that most of the silk trade is quietly processed, and also where the empire's most discreet information passes hand to hand, or loom to loom. Your footsteps are muffled by rugs laid out like breadcrumb trails. You keep moving. The Byzantine capital wasn't just a seat of empire, it was a living maze. Whole neighborhoods acted like filters. The deeper in you went, the fewer questions people asked. Here, in the tangled silk market, the only thing sharper than a loom hook is the smell of secrets. Tonight, you're retrieving, not delivering. The message is hidden inside a robe meant for the patriarch's nephew. You're told to find it at a particular merchant's booth, but the directions are cryptic. Something about third archway, with the rooster tile and a smell like bitter almonds. You find both, eventually. The shopkeeper barely looks up as you approach. He's weaving a sash with practiced boredom. The robe is handed over in silence. You don't open it. You wouldn't dare. The silk itself is heavy dark and smooth as betrayal. Later in your temporary quarters, a spice storage loft above a disused tanner's shop, you unroll the robe. It's magnificent. Black with silver threading, it could pass for a courtier's gift. But you're looking for inconsistency. One thread crossing the wrong direction. a misplaced flower in the border design. You find it near the hem, a pomegranate blossom symbol of resurrection, and also in certain circles of military regrouping. Inside the fold is a sliver of silk, stitched so seamlessly it might be invisible to anyone else. You pull it gently. It slides out like a breath. Historians still argue whether this embroidery code was standardized or improvised. Some claim whole looms were dedicated to spy work. Others say the codes lived only in the heads of their makers. One popular theory suggests that patterns mimicked hymns, each stitch representing a syllable, meaning a hymn embroidered on a sleeve could sing a very different song to a trained operative. You press the silk slip between your palms. It smells faintly of lavender and ink. Out your window, the dome of Hagia Sophia glows amber against the darkening sky. You imagine all the sermons spoken beneath it, all the lies whispered behind its columns. The robe must be returned tomorrow, so you memorize the message tonight. It's simple. The Anatolian roads are no longer safe. Divert to sea route. Boring, you think, but also critical. The empire lives and dies by information. A detour could save a dozen agents and 1,000 lives behind them. As you hide the slip back into the hem, you wonder, who made this robe? Who risked their life to pass a sentence across seams? A nun, a monk, a court tailor with a silent vendetta. You'll never know. That's how it works. You're just one thread in a much larger tapestry, and Byzantium weaves tighter than anyone. You're sitting on a three-legged stool in a shadowy chapel, watching a woman in mourning black thread crimson silk through the sleeve of a bishop's robe. Her fingers move like dancers, sure and fluid, pulling secrets from air and binding them in brocade. She doesn't look up. You shouldn't be here, she murmurs. You stay seated. Her name, or at least the name you were given, is Ileana. She's a widow twice over, once by accident, once by treason. No one talks about the second husband, but everyone agrees she embroiders with the precision of a knife to the jugular. In Byzantium, needlework wasn't just a pastime. It was a language. And the women who mastered it, Asiras, they didn't just stitch saints into altar cloths. They stitched revolutions. Ileana doesn't use patterns. The design comes from memory, or perhaps muscle. You watch her pull one strand taut and tap the cloth with her finger. Once, twice, a pause, then 3 taps in succession. That's the signal she's encoding something. Who's the robe for, you ask? The Patriarch of Antioch, she replies without emotion. He'll never know, it says, your nephew plots with the Bulgars. You raise an eyebrow. Isn't that a bit bold? She smiles, a tight little line. The message isn't for him. It's for the chamberlain laundering the linens. Of course it is. Historians still argue whether such embroidery codes were genuinely complex enough to transmit full messages, or if they simply acted as symbols to trigger memory in an accomplice. But the Byzantine chronicler, Theophylact Simocatta, once mentioned robes which whispered to those who knew how to dress a poetic phrase that some interpret as literal. Ileana's fingers don't falter. She tells you the dyes were mixed with ash from burned religious texts, an old monastic technique. It gives the silk a muted hue, easier to hide in daylight. You ask how she learned the trade. From my mother, who learned from her cellmate, who learned from a bishop's lover. She snips the thread. A single crimson knot flares at the cuff, like a warning flare, seen from far at sea. You examine the garment now complete. To the average eye, it's an ornate, perfectly ecclesiastical robe, but you know what to look for. The pattern of vines curling around the collar isn't symmetrical. The thorns aren't random. They represent syllables. A common cipher among couriers too clever for parchment. You watch her fold the robe, carefully, slowly, like it might explode if handled wrong. It probably won't, but it might explode a career. She ties it with a golden ribbon and hands it to you. Take it to the baths, she says. A boy with a limp will collect it. Does the boy know what he's carrying? No, she replies. But the washerwoman knows how to read vine stitch. Of course she does. Outside, the city is thick with late afternoon heat. The stone walls sweat. You pass markets and messengers stepping over a dog who looks like he knows too much. Somewhere nearby, a brass bell rings twice. That's the signal. You're being watched. You duck into a spice shop, pretend to browse cumin, then slip out the back. You make it to the baths. The boy is there barefoot, limping, whistling the imperial anthem off key. He takes the robe, doesn't look inside, just grins and disappears down a corridor of steam and shadows. Back on the street, you breathe easier. The sun sets. Another thread tugged, another whisper loosed. Byzantium isn't built of stone and gold. It's stitched in silk and secrets. Your contact tonight is not a tailor or widow, but a courier. A lanky man with eyes too quick for someone pretending to be invisible. You meet him just outside the hippodrome beneath the carved marble horses that once gazed over chariot races but now watch only the creeping rust of time. He doesn't speak. Instead, he hands you a spindle. Just a wooden rod, thick and clunky, with an innocent tangle of undyed silk wrapped around it. It looks like the sort of thing a weaver's apprentice might carry. Unremarkable, forgettable. That's the point. The message isn't in the spindle. It is the spindle. You've been briefed on this technique. A message is written often in code on a long, narrow strip of silk. Then it's wrapped tightly around a core over and over, sealed under layers of mundane thread. To the casual eye, it's just a bundle of raw material. But to those in the know, it's a scroll hidden in plain sight. Tonight, you're the delivery mechanism. You tuck the spindle into a sling bag already dusted with flour to give the impression you've come straight from a baker's delivery. Classic misdirection. Smelling faintly of cinnamon and espionage, you make your way north through the city. You pass a funeral procession. The mourners don't cry. They chant. The sound rises and falls like breathing. A few faces in the crowd glance your way. One stares too long. You change routes. Down an alley paved with fish scales and gossip, you stop in the shadow of a crumbling statue. There, you're supposed to meet someone, a weaver, known only as Drosos. Instead, you find a goat chewing someone's laundry and no sign of human contact. You wait. 5 minutes? 10. Finally, a child peeks out from behind a market stall. He's gone, she whispers. They came last night, took his loom, burned the rest. You nod grimly. Drosos was one of the best, a master of encoded fiber weaves. But Byzantium has a way of chewing up its finest artisans when politics shifts. Still, the delivery must go on. You adjust the bag and head toward your backup route through the Blackernay Quarter, where the houses lean in like gossiping neighbors. The streets here are quieter. You pass a wall covered in ivy, except the ivy is fake dyed silk threaded through gaps in the stone. A message. You don't stop to read it. Historians still argue whether these spindle scrolls were primarily used by military envoys or church intermediaries. Some claim the method came from Chinese influence brought via the Silk Road. Others believe it originated within the empire's own labyrinthine bureaucracy. Regardless, the technique was genius, compact, durable, and if needed, burnable in under 5 seconds. At a quiet garden near the monastery of Studios, you find the new contact. She's weaving a small carpet, a real one, probably. Her hands never pause, but her eyes dart toward the spindle. You place it beside her basket of colored thread. She doesn't speak. Neither do you. You walk away. Halfway down the street, a man selling olives smiles too broadly. A second man steps into your path, pretending to trip. You sidestep both. When you reach the Arch of Theodosius, you finally exhale. The message is delivered. You don't know what it said. Maybe troop movements. Maybe a monk's confession. Maybe just a grocery list in code. But it made it. That's enough. Because here in Byzantium, the line between ordinary and extraordinary is thinner than a strand of silk and just as easy to miss. Tonight, you're in the quarter known for paper and ink. Bookbinders, scribes, and philosophers rub shoulders in streets dusted with parchment scraps. You're here for something far more ephemeral than books' mulberry ink and the scandalous whispers around its peculiar properties. The shop you enter is small, almost pointedly so. Crates of crushed mulberries crowd the corners. A spindle of raw silk dangles from the rafters, fluttering gently with each breath of wind. Behind the counter stands a woman with ink-stained fingers and a look that says she already knows what you came for. I need a vial, you say. She raises an eyebrow. For writing or for disappearing? You hesitate. Both. She chuckles, disappears behind a curtain, and returns with a glass vial filled with purplish black liquid. It shimmers faintly in the dim light like secrets poured into a bottle. Mulberry ink wasn't just dye. According to Byzantine apocrypha and a few alarmingly detailed letters from paranoid abbots, it possessed a curious feature. When brushed lightly onto silk and dried, the text would become nearly invisible until exposed to candle smoke. Then, under the right angle, the message would ghost back into view for a few moments, just long enough to read, and then vanish again. You ask if it's true. She shrugs. Historians still argue whether the ink even existed. Some say it was just wishful thinking from spy novelists before their time. But she slides the vial toward you. I've seen letters speak through smoke. Outside, you test a drop on a strip of silk. It soaks in, beautifully dries within minutes. You hold it over a candle. Nothing. Then slowly, like mist forming on a mirror, faint letters shimmer into view. You were right not to trust him. Meet me by the fig tree. You blink, and it's gone again. That was a test scrap pre-written. But it proves the technique works. Now it's your turn. You duck into a nearby church courtyard, light a candle, and begin writing. Your hand shakes a little. Each brush stroke vanishes almost instantly into the weave. You write, enemy troop movement confirmed. Coastal path compromised. You dry it by waving it like a prayer flag, then wrap it around your forearm under a linen sleeve. You can't help but wonder who discovered this trick. Was it an accident? Mulberry juice spilled in frustration during a failed confession? Or was it a calculated innovation, born from necessity? During wartime, theories abound. Some suggest the recipe originated in Persia and was smuggled into Byzantium by a disillusioned calligrapher. Others think it was monastic in origin, monks in Mount Athos experimenting with ink to protect sacred texts from hostile eyes. One chronicle mentions a shadow script technique in which messages were layered visible ink for scripture, hidden mulberry ink for rebellion. Whether it's legend or truth, it gives you a chill. As you pass through the library district, you see children playing knucklebones beside a statue of Minerva. One of them is drawing shapes in the dust with a stick dipped in purple juice. You squint. For a moment, the symbols look eerily like shorthand. You shake your head. Paranoia is part of the job. Later, you find your contact, an aging scholar with a hunched back and a voice like damp parchment. He doesn't ask for the scroll. He simply lights a candle and holds your sleeve above it. The words appear. His eyes widen just slightly. "It's real," he whispers. You nod. He sighs. "Good. Then the mountain route must be closed." And quickly, he presses a new strip into your hand. Already inked. Already dry. You don't test it. You never test what's meant for someone else. As you leave, a breeze rustles the silk at your wrist. And for a heartbeat, you feel like the empire itself is breathing with you through smoke silk and silence. You descend into the belly of the city, where the clack of looms echoes like distant hoofbeats. This is the Weavers' Guild district, not marked on any map, of course, but every true Constantinopolitan knows it by the scent of lanolin and fermented dye. Officially, these people are artisans. Unofficially, they're the Empire's most trusted messengers. The guild headquarters is hidden behind an innocuous storefront selling ribbons and lace. You show a crimson-threaded ring at the door. No words are exchanged. You're allowed in. Inside, the air is thick with heat and the churn of labor. Great wooden looms fill the space, operated by men and women whose faces remain blank even as their fingers race. You're guided to the back, where the true work happens on smaller looms, finer needles, and quieter breath. A woman named Kyriaki greets you. She's perhaps 50, her hands rough with calluses, her posture perfect. A master of what she calls sleeve speak. You sit beside her as she begins a demonstration. She takes a thread of russet silk, winds it over her thumb, and starts weaving a pattern into a belt. At first glance, it's decorative, just zigzags and fleur-de-lis. But Kyriaki explains how every third zigzag correlates to a vowel, and every skipped thread to a consonant. Her belt spells, "The ships will sail early." It's poetry in motion. The Empire's enemies use pigeon couriers. Byzantium, it uses haberdashery. Historians still argue whether these guild codes were invented during wartime or as a result of internal court paranoia. One theory posits that Emperor Theophilos himself established the Weavers' Pact during a campaign against Arab raiders. The guild, in exchange for tax exemptions and special dyes, would transmit imperial directives silently through their textiles. Kyriaki shows you a sash designed to resemble an astrological diagram. To the untrained eye, it's harmless ornamentation. But in truth, it outlines troop placements in Cappadocia using planetary positions as coordinates. Ingenious and terrifying. You ask her how many people know this language. She stops weaving. Less than 50, and most of us are old. You nod. There's talk of a successor, a boy in the dye pits who shows promise. But he's still clumsy, still mistakes Alpha for Aleph, East for Dawn. He could get someone killed. So for now, the old guard works in silence. You watch another artisan work a pattern into the hem of a priest's stole. Each swirl signifies a date. A festoon at the bottom indicates a location. Together, they schedule a meeting between high-ranking allies hidden in plain sight around a bishop's shoulders. Before you leave, Kyriaki wraps your wrist with a silk ribbon. You assume it's a farewell token until she tightens it just so and whispers, "It says safe house in Smyrna. Only show it if you're bleeding." You don't ask how she encoded that into 12 centimeters of ribbon. You don't want to know. Outside, the wind picks up, fluttering the ribbon like a flag. You wrap it tighter. You pass a group of nobles admiring a tapestry. One of them is laughing, saying it looks like chaos, stitched by a madman. You smile, because you know it's actually a treaty. And if he knew how to read it, he'd stop laughing. The air thins as you climb the path toward the monastic cells, clinging to the cliffside like barnacles. The sea far below crashes in a slow rhythm, a reminder of how far from Constantinople you've come. You're in Pontus now, and your breath fogs with each step. The wind here doesn't gossip, it howls. But it's safer than the palace. The monastery appears around a bend, a simple stone compound carved into the rock, crowned with a bell tower that hasn't rung in years. The monks who live here speak rarely. When they do, their words fall like snow, silent, slow, but capable of reshaping mountains. You are here to meet Brother Mikkel. He greets you with a nod and a steaming cup of herbal broth. No names, no discussion. Just warmth and the faint scent of ink, beeswax, and damp wool. The monks here weave their own robes, grow their own food, and more importantly, write their own codes. The room he takes you to is deep within the mountain, lit only by oil lamps. 3 looms stand like altars, their frames ancient and polished smooth by decades of reverent touch. A single strip of violet silk lies stretched across one. This is no ordinary monastery. You sit beside Mikkel as he works. The silence here is sacred, not just a religious vow, but a strategic one. Messages spoken can be overheard. Messages written can be intercepted. But messages woven in silence, they are practically divine. He demonstrates by threading gold into the violet. Each knot, each change of direction, each double weave tells a story. It's a conversation between looms. No ink, no voice. No eyes, but God's and yours. He weaves for 20 minutes. You watch, feeling the rhythm seep into your bones. When he's done, the ribbon is passed to you. You run your fingers along it. You've learned enough now to recognize the pattern, a plea for grain shipments. The monastery is starving. You nod and promise nothing. Promises are dangerous currency. Historians still argue whether these remote monasteries acted independently or under the empire's orders. Some say they were rogue information hubs. Others claim their secrecy was part of the design, a decentralized net to catch what the central court missed. One theory suggests that a rival monastic order, the Paleologan Circle, once wove false messages into textiles meant for enemy spies, leading to a catastrophic naval ambush. Michael says nothing when you mention this, but his frown deepens. He leads you through a side corridor into a scriptorium. Here monks copy texts the old-fashioned way, but the margins of each page contain threadbare embellishments, not ink, but tiny silk knots sewn into the parchment's edge. Hidden commentary, perhaps, or corrections, or warnings. As you explore further, Mikhail pauses at a carved wooden panel on the wall. He touches one of the patterns. This, he says softly, tells us when it's no longer safe to stay. You look closer. It's just a swirl of vines and stars. Beautiful, but meaningless. Until you realize each vine loop represents a specific moon phase. And the stars aren't decorative. They're in the same formation as the imperial calendar. The date is 3 days from now. He pats your shoulder. If we're not here when you return, don't look for us. You leave with a belt of coated silk hidden beneath your tunic and a belly full of herbs you can't name. On the path down the cliff, you hear a bell ring, once then twice. You weren't told it still worked. You don't look back. The monastery behind you may vanish, but the message in your robe will not. By the time you reach the valley, outside Trebizond, the silk has started to itch. Not from wear, but from anxiety. The Empire's enemies are growing bolder, and tonight you're about to see just how far they'll go to unravel Byzantium's woven web. Your mission: simple confirm rumors that rival agents have begun sabotaging silkworm farms. And if the rumors are true, find out who's behind it. You arrive at a sericulture outpost nestled between cypress groves where rows of white mulberry trees sway in the dusk. The keepers greet you with suspicious silence. Their eyes flick to your sash, which you've dyed a plain brown for camouflage. They recognize the weave. You're allowed in. Inside the main house, trays of silkworms lie like living necklaces, slowly munching leaves. Everything seems normal. Too normal. Then you see the signs. A row of cocoons prematurely blackened. Worms curling strangely as if poisoned. One farmer leads you to a back chamber where jars of mulberry paste smell sharply of almonds. Not ours, he whispers. You test it with a shard of silver. It tarnishes almost instantly. Cyanide low dose, slow acting. Enough to ruin an entire yield. You nod grimly. Sabotage. Historians still argue whether this practice deliberately targeting sericulture was common or just a footnote in imperial paranoia. But one letter, housed in the patriarchal library, mentions a plague, not of nature, but of men, ravaging the cocoon harvest in 973 AD. Some dismiss it as metaphor. You're standing in its reality. You interview a trembling apprentice who swears he saw two hooded men slip into the storage barn 3 nights ago. They didn't take anything, he says. They sprinkled things. You check the barn. The dye vats are all sealed, except one. Inside a spool of deep purple silk, imperial color floats belly up in what should be a clean indigo base. A thin layer of oil glistens on the surface. You touch it with a stylus. The slick sheen doesn't smear. You sniff it nutty, chemical bitter. The dye has been contaminated. You spend the next hour documenting the scene in silk shorthand, tying knots into a length of thread you'll later stitch into your robe's lining. When done, you burn the rest. No risks. Later, as you sit beneath a mulberry tree with the farm matron, she tells you of a shipment bound for Antioch that never arrived. The carrier pigeons didn't either. No word, no silk, just wind and suspicion. She hands you a swatch from the lost batch, pure golden silk, unnaturally smooth. You twist it in your fingers and feel something off. It's too perfect. Then it clicks, it's synthetic. Somehow someone is faking Byzantine silk. A forgery so clean it could fool a bishop or a spy. The implications are massive. Fake silk means fake codes. And fake codes mean misdirected armies, ruined alliances, assassinations. As night falls, you return to the main house. A fire has been lit in the hearth, casting strange shadows on the loom frames. You sit writing your report on a fresh strip of silk, using knots and inks, and your memory of every poisoned leaf. When you leave, the trees seem darker. The worms sleep, but you don't, because if enemies can poison the threads, they can poison the message, and the empire could unravel from the inside out. The palace is breathing tonight long, slow inhales through marble corridors and scented gardens. You're here under false pretenses, of course. Not as a diplomat, not as clergy, but as a humble robe mender, summoned to fix a ceremonial tunic ahead of tomorrow's feast. That's the story. The truth is more slippery. You step through the bronze gate into the servants' vestibule. Your tunic is plain, your hands stained with dye. You play the part perfectly. No one looks twice. The banquet hall glitters beyond a set of gold-leafed doors. Candles blaze in chandeliers like constellations trapped indoors. Courtiers glide in silken splendor, each robe more elaborate than the last. It's an empire of peacocks. But you're watching for the falcon. Your target is seated near the emperor, young noble, and far too confident. He wears a tunic of silver-threaded silk that shimmers with every gesture. At first glance, it's an ode to vanity. But you're not here to critique his fashion. You're here because somewhere inside that tunic, according to your contact, lies a coded order to kill. You work your way through the side corridors until you reach the robbing chamber. There, laid out on a cedar rack, are the backup garments of the evening's guests. You find a near match to the assassin's attire, a duplicate robe unused, yours to inspect. You turn it over carefully. The embroidery is stunning phoenixes, spiraling up from the hem, flame motifs licking the sleeves. But then you spot it, a line of thread along the inner collar that doesn't match the sheen of the rest. You run your fingers along it. Stiff, new, hidden. You use a candle to illuminate the pattern. It's there, barely. A sequence of stitch shifts that spells a name, Domitian, not the emperor, but the name of a naval general known for his quiet loyalty to the throne. The phrase that follows, before the second goblet. Historians still argue whether assassination orders were truly embedded in clothing this way, or if such tales were court gossip inflated by terrified bureaucrats. One letter from the archives of Kora Monastery tells of a robe of death worn once and never again, but its veracity remains debated. You leave the chamber and slip back into the crowd. The general is already seated. The assassin, still smiling, raises his goblet. You move quickly, bumping into a servant who just delivered the first course. Apologies, napkins, a spill, but enough to trigger the palace guards who've been trained to read your subtle hand signal. Within moments, the young noble is escorted from the room under the pretense of illness. No fuss, no panic. The emperor raises an eyebrow but says nothing. The banquet continues. Later, in a quiet courtyard, the robe is burned in a brazier. You watch the flames consume the phoenixes. Fitting. One of the guards hands you a reward pouch. You hand it back. I came to stitch, not sell, you say. He nods. He understands. You leave through a garden path where peacocks mutter in their sleep and fig trees drip with dew. In your pocket, you keep a single thread from the assassin's robe, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Even in a world stitched with silk and gold, some threads are made of poison. The scriptorium smells of ink and lemon oil, and somewhere beneath it, all sweat. Not the sweat of laborers or soldiers, but of men who fear spelling errors. You're deep within the imperial palace now, tucked behind layers of carved marble and perfumed corridors. But this room is all business parchment quills and silk-bound secrets. The scribes here aren't ordinary. They're eunuchs, trusted beyond measure by the emperor because they're seen as impartial, incorruptible. You know better. No one is truly neutral in Byzantium, not even men without heirs. You're here to meet Timotheus, a scribe whose quiet life involves copying scripture and occasionally slipping treason into the margins. He greets you with a nod, his hand stained midnight blue with indigo ink. His robes are immaculate, trimmed with a border of pale gold. You recognize the weave narrow enough to hide a paragraph if you know how to read the folds. He lays out a scroll on the desk and begins his daily task copying the Acts of the Apostles. But watch closely. Every third stroke of his quill is slightly longer. Every fourth word begins with a curve too ornate for its place. It's beautiful and dangerous. I write for two audiences, he says softly. One holy, one hungry. He means the church and the spies. Timotheus shows you a velvet case hidden beneath the scriptorium floor. Inside, narrow ribbons of silk, each one only as long as a man's forearm. Written in microscript, they contain summaries of palace intrigues, which ambassador said what who was seen where, who bowed too low or not at all. These ribbons are not transported in sleeves or hems. They're inserted into the bindings of holy books. A bishop receives a psalter. Inside, a coded ribbon warning of heresy in his court. Genius. Historians still argue whether the eunuchs of the scriptorium were active agents or simply exploited conduits. One chronicler claims the emperor's favorite eunuch once rerouted an army with a single phrase stitched into a gospel's spine. True or not, the fear stuck. Timotheus pauses, then beckons you to a side desk. He opens a tome of poetry, flips to the final page, and pulls free a silk bookmark. You examine it. A single line stitched in minuscule shimmering thread. The one you trust walks with another's shadow. A warning. Perhaps for you. Perhaps for someone else. He hands it to you. No instructions. You're to pass it along, but to whom? That's the question. Half the job of a Byzantine courier is knowing who not to tell. You leave through a servant's corridor, the bookmark folded into your waistband. Outside, bells ring for vespers, and you pass priests reciting rote prayers while side-glancing at one another with quiet calculation. On the marble steps near the imperial chapel, you see a group of palace aides gathered in hushed conversation. One of them wears a robe stitched by Kyriaki, the weaver, from earlier. You recognize her work instantly. You smile. The web continues. And somewhere inside, Timotheos writes on. Not in parchment alone, but in silk, sweat, and silence. The road to the eastern frontier is long and gray, with dust stitched with ancient ruts from too many caravans and too few repairs. You're disguised again this time as a minor clerk, escorting textile samples to a garrison near the Persian border. Your real mission lies hidden in the hem of your tunic, a silk letter faintly scented with cloves, inked with secrets, meant for a general whose name isn't spoken above a whisper. You ride a mule. Faster animals draw attention. The further east you go, the fewer Byzantine banners you see. The land begins to shift, olive groves giving way to dry hills, the Greek chatter fading to harsher dialects. You keep your head down and your tunic straight. A checkpoint looms ahead, little more than a wooden gate, flanked by bored soldiers who don't wear your colors. Persian scouts, most likely. You're not supposed to encounter them this early. You slow your mule, let it seem tired. One of the guards eyes your saddlebag. "What's your business?" he asks, voice flat. "Textiles," you reply. "For a wedding." He gestures for the bag. You hand it over. Inside, bolts of patterned silk, dyed in imperial colors, deep crimson, sea green, muted gold. One of the bolts contains the letter. Historians still argue whether silk letter interception was common or just feared. Some sources suggest that Persian agents developed their own methods for revealing hidden inks, rosewater, mist-heated sand, even fermented fig pulp. You watch as the guard pokes a rod into the silks, then unrolls one. Not the right one. He loses interest, returns the bundle. You're waved through heart-pounding. You make it to the garrison by nightfall. A man in armor meets you at the gate, stoic, aged, more scar than skin. He says nothing, but points to a storehouse. Inside, by candlelight, you retrieve the bolt of silk and carefully cut the hem. The letter slides out a ribbon, no wider than your pinky, covered in tiny script. The general reads it once, then twice, then lights it on fire. "Too late," he mutters. You say nothing. You're not here to ask questions. But later, over flatbread and sour wine, he tells you the message was a warning. A new Persian outpost, disguised as a merchant's inn, has been gathering intelligence on Byzantine troop movements. The sender feared a strike. The general confirms it has already begun. 2 scouts, missing 1 caravan, looted no survivors. And yet your delivery still mattered. Without it, they wouldn't have known where to look next. He gives you a new strip of silk, blank to the eye, but pre-treated for invisible ink. "Take it to Antioch," he says. "Tell them we bleed slowly. You leave at dawn. The hills rise before you like old regrets. You keep the burned scent of the silk letter in your cloak, the ashes clinging like ghosts." In Byzantium, survival isn't about might. It's about the silk that slips through fingers unseen, and the words that vanish just in time. The city of Antioch bustles with heat and fruit flies. You're in a crowded market square where figs burst from their skins and gossip flows like honey. Somewhere in this chaos, you're to meet a defector, a former spy whose betrayal was stitched not in silver, but in scarlet silk and gifted to his lover. You find him in a taverna, too dim for midday, hunched over a bowl of lentils. His name is Lucan, and he looks exactly as you were told, handsome in a regrettable way, like a painting smudged by time. He doesn't greet you, just slides a folded cloth across the table, a handkerchief of fine silk embroidered with pomegranates and vines. A love token. But you know better. Do you still see her, you ask? He shakes his head. She saw the message. That was enough. You unfold the cloth. The vines form familiar curves. The pomegranates, not ornamental. They spell names, 5 of them, all dead now thanks to this single piece of silk. Lucan betrayed his own spy cell by hiding those names in the embroidery of a gift. His lover, an imperial courier, discovered it by accident. Or perhaps she always suspected. Either way, the result was swift. Why do this, you ask? He shrugs, tired of whispers, wanted something loud. Historians still argue whether Lucan's betrayal truly changed anything, whether the deaths disrupted operations or simply tightened the net. Some believe the handkerchief was a decoy, a smokescreen for a bigger leak. Others say it was the first silk message to cause a public execution inside the hippodrome. Lucan leans back. I haven't stitched a thing since. But he has. You see it in the cuffs of his shirt. Anxious threadwork. Small repeated knots that spell remorse in a code few remember. Perhaps he's still trying to explain himself stitch by stitch to a woman long gone. You leave the taverna with the handkerchief tucked into your satchel. It's fragile, more threadbare than you expected. You can almost hear it fraying. Back in your lodging, you examine the stitches more closely. The thread used in one corner is darker rust brown. You think it might be blood, or ink aged beyond recognition. You begin to unpick that corner, slowly, carefully. Hidden inside is a second strip of silk, no wider than a quill, sewn flat between 2 layers of thread. A confession, a final message. You read it aloud, barely a whisper. I loved her, and I loved the Empire. I chose wrong. You burn the strip, not out of duty, out of mercy. Some messages aren't meant to last. Outside the market sings again. A boy sells silk ribbons dyed with saffron and lies. You buy one, just in case. Because here, love letters can start wars and end them. And in Byzantium, betrayal always comes wrapped in beauty. The old man greets you with a bow, so slow it nearly turns to prayer. He's seated on a faded cushion in a crumbling tea house near the docks of Thessalonica. His robe layered with patches that whisper of once regal threads. This is Elias, a former informant, once brilliant, now forgotten. But today, he's unraveling a memory, literally. You sit beside him as he tugs a thread from the hem of his robe, unraveling it inch by inch. Each tug is gentle practiced. The silk slips away in loops, revealing seams within seams, like peeling an onion soaked in history. I wore this during the raid on Amasea, he murmurs. That was 30 years ago. You don't interrupt. Some stories must be coaxed from silence. The robe itself is coarse now, dulled by time, but once it gleamed. And beneath the outer layer, buried in folds, you begin to see the message. A strip of white silk, paler than moonlight, emerges like a ghost. I stitched it when I thought I'd die, Elias says. Turns out I lived too long. Historians still argue whether these end-of-life messages were common practice or rare acts of poetic desperation. One diary recovered from a shipwrecked monk describes a robe so thick with encoded regrets it could barely be worn. The monk drowned anyway. Elias's message is brief. Simple cursive inked in indigo. The letters faded but legible. The raid was ours. Forgive me. It's a confession. The kind never sent, never meant to be read, until now. You ask if he ever delivered the message. He shakes his head. Too many names. Too few ears that would believe it. He hands you the strip. It's soft as breath, warm from his body. I trust you'll burn it, he says. You nod, but instead, you fold it carefully and tuck it between the pages of your travel log. Some truths deserve to linger at least a little while longer. You stay with him as the sun sets. He talks of past operations, false friends, real lovers, of a message stitched into the sleeve of a dead soldier's coat, of a prayer hidden in a bishop's mitre. At one point, he laughs softly. You know I once smuggled a poem through a bread delivery, baked it right into the crust. You smile? Of course he did. When he falls asleep in his chair, snoring faintly, you slip away. The robe remains on the cushion, half unraveled threads coiled like vines. You walk to the harbor and gaze at the ships. Tomorrow, you sail home. Tonight, you carry a confession. Soft as silk, heavy as history. You return to Constantinople under cloud-choked skies. The sea is restless, lapping at the city's marbled edge like it wants to reclaim something. Your boots strike familiar cobbles, but everything feels a shade removed, like you've stepped into a memory. You carry no silk tonight, no coated thread, no hemstitch prophecy. Just a robe jet black lined with crimson. You've been summoned to the Blackernay Palace. The Emperor's cloak needs mending. That's the official reason. But no one believes official reasons anymore. The palace glows in torchlight, each flame caught in the golden tesserae of its mosaics. You're escorted through quiet halls. Even the guards step lightly. The Emperor waits in a vaulted chamber, lit by a dozen oil lamps. He does not stand. The cloak is draped over a marble table. It is exquisite. Layered with peacock feather patterns, trimmed in lion motifs, it shimmers with threads only priests and kings dare wear. But you're not here to admire. You're here because something is wrong. You examine the lining. It seems untouched, until you lift the right shoulder. There, stitched into the seam with thread so fine it vanishes at a glance, is a name. Theophilos, not the emperor, the assassin. Your breath stills. Beneath the name, cloak, him crown, him cut him. A death order, embedded in the emperor's own garment. A message not for him, but about him. You look up. The emperor is watching you with an expression you can't read. Do you see it? He asks. You nod. And what would you do? You weigh the cloak in your hands. It is heavy with power, with risk. with woven conspiracy. I would restitch it, you say, with different thread. He smiles just barely. Historians still argue whether emperors knew about the codes carried in their own garments. Some chronicles claim they did and wore them anyway as a test of fate. Others insist palace robes were triple-checked by silent monks trained in unraveling secrets before they could coil around the throne. You work quietly, replacing the thread with a pattern that says nothing and means everything. A swirl of stars, a shape like a fig leaf, a lie dressed as decoration. When you finish, the emperor lifts the cloak and lays it over his shoulders. How does it look? Untouched, you reply. He nods. Good, you are dismissed. Outside the city breathes again. Rain begins to fall, light hesitant. You walk beneath it, letting the droplets erase everything but the silk at your wrist. That last thread from the would-be assassin's robe. You let it go. It unravels in the wind, dancing briefly in the lamplight before disappearing down a gutter. Because in Byzantium, even truth is woven. And sometimes it's better left in the seams. Now, as the lamps in the palace dim and the city exhales once more, you find yourself walking slower. The streets are quieter now. The scent of wet stone and distant frankincense filling the air. You pass shuttered stalls, dark windows, and sleeping cats curled on worn thresholds. Your boots no longer echo. The rain has softened everything. You think of the silk you've carried, the messages you've read or never read. The names that pass through your fingers like grains of salt. The words stitched by hands trembling with fear or duty or love. You think of Ileana's embroidery, of Mikhail's monastic weavings, of Elias and his unraveling robe. Each thread, each knot, each loop woven not just into garments but into lives, into an empire too proud to whisper, but too clever not to. You've walked alleys darker than sin, ridden paths dustier than memory. You've watched secrets burn. You've stitched lies into holiness. You've said nothing, because that's what the job demands. Now, as you reach the edge of the city and gaze back at its glowing domes and shifting shadows, you understand something you didn't before. Not all messages are meant to be sent. Some are meant to be carried, silently, carefully, forever. The wind picks up again, softer now. You pull your cloak tighter. Feel the weight of the silk lining against your back. And for the first time in days, you close your eyes, not to hide, not to remember, but to rest. Because even the whisperers need sleep. Even the silent must dream.